Hey buns, well, PAX East has happened, and it was so much more crazy than I ever expected. I think any bun expected. We did get release dates, which is great. You know, Dawn Trail Early Access starts June 28th. The release is July 2nd. The FF16 crossover is April 2nd, and we got the pre-order date, which is now. You can pre-order the game now. Got some info on the Collector's Edition, the pre-order bonuses for Dawn Trail, but I don't need to go over all that. Okay, what I want to talk about here today is the fact that I, and others like me, who dared to criticize FF14 and be honest about the concerning direction that the game seemed to be going in, have now been vindicated by the man himself, YoshiP. Yes, all those people who ripped me to shreds for being critical of the state of the game are probably mauling so hard right now, and I feel really good about it. Let's pull up the PowerPoint that YoshiP showed at PAX. I do believe that I made a video wherein I pointed out the following issues with the game. That during Endwalker, the game has felt lonely and isolating because of so much focus on solo, casual, and small group content, and not enough of the MMO content, the multiplayer stuff. I said that the game suffered from not having the large-scale zones like Baja or Eureka, the cool place where everything's going on. I remember I said that the game had gotten too predictable, too formulaic, and that there were not enough good rewards for content like the Criterion Dungeon. I've also made videos where I talked about the fact that the game had gotten too easy and boring in a lot of aspects, and so sometimes it would feel like I'm watching a movie instead of interacting with the game, and how a lot of the game is either super easy story mode in a snooze or super difficult with not a whole lot in between. And well, all that stuff that I got so much hate for being honest about, well, it turns out YoshiP shares those very same complaints and has decided to act on that feedback, which he seems to believe was quite valuable. So I don't want to say I told you so, but let's talk about the specific plans that YoshiP has for the future of FF14 as an MMO going into Dawn Trail, looking at the next era of the game. He did say that we have been catering to casual and solo players recently, but now we want to focus on that multiplayer content again and the large-scale duties like Eureka and Baja. But they're not going to be neglecting the solo and small-scale content and the casual stuff. They're still updating variant. But they're going to be doing that in parallel with the MMO content. And one thing you might notice that I felt like throughout this presentation was that it seems like they've got a bigger budget. He said they're going for the more fulfilling gaming experience. Yes. He said battle mechanics are rather similar, content to content. There's a pattern almost. He says, he actually said, but I get sleepy and it gets routine and mundane. Like, we were watching this live on the restream and I just couldn't believe my ears. It sounded like he was up there roasting his own game. I have never heard YoshiP be this candid and honest about his game before.
And in terms of battle mechanics, they tend to be very similar content to content. And some people might feel that it's very repetitive, it feels like a pattern almost. And of course, it might help if you are trying to build your gameplay experience and try to get a hang of it. But for some players, me included, I kind of get sleepy because it kind of gets routine and mundane.
He did say that they're ready to spice it up a little. They're ready to bring back excitement. He said you shouldn't fall asleep when you're engaged with a game. Like, that's not going to be happening if you're into what you're doing. And knee-jerk reactions, he says, to people saying, oh no, Yoshida will make everything difficult. I'm not trying to make your lives difficult. But then he, to illustrate this point, he shared a Japanese word, kuhu. I think that's how you say it, which basically means figure it out. Related to that feedback around wanting a more fulfilling gaming experience, the hitbox circle is ridiculously large, but he didn't talk about how they're going to address that, because if you make the hitbox smaller, then you might have issues with melee uptime, and large hitboxes usually means that you can use more of the arena space, so these are questions for how they're going to approach that in the future. But one thing I do want to make very, very clear is that he has not said, we will make the game more difficult. He has never said those words. That is not the words he has ever used or said. Here are some things that he has said, because he's been very careful about his words. He said, You will need to think more, strategize, figure it out. You know, kuhu, that word that he shared with us. He said you should not be falling asleep while playing. He has said we don't want it to be mundane. And like a week ago, I think this can add some more context to what he's actually saying. He said, looking back in this Famitsu interview, I think we might have made Final Fantasy XIV too comfortable and stress-free over the past 10 years. Maybe too much so. He said, a video game should of course have an element of stress, but how to handle that properly is extremely difficult. For example, in a side-scrolling game, if there aren't any holes you can drop down into if you miss a jump, of course the game will lose its stress, but it would also lose its fun. Speaking of FF14, I would like to restore that part a little bit. If we do that, we can give everyone a better challenge in a good way than ever before. That is what he is saying. He's talking about meaningful challenges that are fun. That interview got mistranslated, and a lot of people started flying off the handle saying, oh my God, they're going to make the game super hard. They're going to raise the difficulty. That is not what he said. He's never said that. He said better challenges, more meaningful challenges, more fun, more fun. At the same time, and I'm going to be a little evil here with the suggestion, but this is my personal opinion. Please take it with a grain of salt. And it could be copium. I feel like it kind of sounds like he's saying all the things that I would say if I wanted to make it a little more difficult, but I also didn't want to scare people away by using the word difficult. Like, he cannot, even if he wanted to do that, okay, he could not get on stage and say, we're making the game harder, you know, deal with it, get good, right? He couldn't do that because that's probably not good PR. I personally don't think that more engaging has to mean more difficult. I just think that it could mean introducing a failure state where there was not one previously. Like in his example of the side-scrolling game without any holes to fall into, like where's the fun in that? How do you have fun without holes? Let me rephrase. What is a game that doesn't give you any meaningful obstacles to overcome? It just becomes a little bland and forgettable. Like at that point, you could just watch a movie or watch someone else play a game like me on twitch.tv/ThePlayHQ. Or you can invite me to your party and I will create obstacles for you. But also, I think it is kind of sad that we've reached a point where suggesting that you shouldn't fall asleep in the content has YoshiP worried that some people will interpret that as the game will be too hard. But like YoshiP predicted, I can imagine that not everyone is going to be super thrilled with the game asking more of them than it does currently. Like anytime there's change at all, there will be people who are mad about the change, even if it's for the best. But for me, it's music to my ears. I mean, lately, I've come to understand just how much I enjoy stress in games.
Piece of shit! Oh my god! Now we can devour gods together!
You know, YoshiP did say that he's playing the Elden Ring DLC, and that is why the expansion is releasing a week later. He was like, you have 1 week. So hear me out. Millennia Ultimate Raid. YoshiP also said at PAX, considering all of this, what is going to happen to the jobs and their mechanics? Because that is obviously another really important component of this big discussion about the state of the game and the feedback around all of this that he's clearly listening to, because the jobs becoming overly homogenized, and this 2-minute meta's contribution to that is like, you can't hear someone complain about giant hitboxes without also hearing the complaint about the 2-minute meta, like 5 minutes. I wish they would just change it so people would shut up about it already. God, I've heard people talk about the 2-minute meta every 2 minutes. So I feel like just for him to ask this question shows that he is acknowledging and aware of all of the feedback. But he said that we are reaching level 100, so we don't want to upend everything right now, which makes sense. Like, there's only so much that they can do at one time. But he said that we will add on to what we have. For now, they're going to focus on content and encounters to bring back excitement. YoshiP also talked about improved rewards, but he was really vague about it. I actually have no idea what he's talking about. Hold on, let me check my Aaronville notes. So cute. He said, since Realm Reborn, we were unable to increase the number of rewards in terms of gear or mounts. We became more wide and broad with the content overall. So we will now offer more rewards. We have plans in place that by patch 7.3, 1.5 times more rewards compared to current. What does that mean? Are we talking about, like, this could actually mean anything. This could mean mounts. This could mean extra gear. No one knows. But he did say that with our sub money, they're going to give back. And that's another reason why I feel like we got a big budget finally. Finally, I feel like the game has gotten a budget increase. But again, while YoshiP did not specifically say that they're going to make it harder, I wouldn't mind if they did raise the difficulty, because I first fell in love with the game back in Heaven's Ward, and I was not good at the game, obviously, when I started. Like, I still think I'm probably not that good, but I still was able to, as a beginner, feel really engaged and have a lot of fun in some of that content that was harder from the get-go. Like, I remember the Vault dungeon really fondly, because it was notorious for a few bosses that would wipe the team if you were not careful. I remember being a new tank and feeling so much pride when I figured out how to handle Sir Grino and his void portals that would do crazy damage if you stood near them, or even worse if you got knocked back into one. The tether mechanic on the last boss was also pretty nasty if someone didn't know what to do. And then you have to have the DPS purge the sickness or whatever. Even now, it's a challenge sometimes. I was curious to see, like, do I remember the vault being hard because I was bad? Or was it really hard? And I Googled it, and yeah, it was really hard. I found this interview with the creator of the vault, who was also the chief creator behind the Unending Coil of Bahamut, where he had been asked, you mentioned you had free reign to create content, but do you have a different criteria for making content for dungeons that are part of the main story quest? And Pseudo said that for main story quest dungeons, they try to make it the location appropriate for the scenario and make the mechanics easy to understand so everyone can enjoy. However, the vault was special. For these reasons, I think I overdid it. Healers that had to go through it at the time of release, I'm sorry. And this post also showed some reactions from JP players who said, I thought the vault was difficult, and then I found Pseudo did it. Never forget that serial killer Pseudo, who made sprouts who hadn't even hit level 60 to dodge ground AoEs plus tethers plus frontal AoEs simultaneously. I was one of those sprouts. I forgive Pseudo. That's when I learned to get good as a healer. Oh, it was Pseudo. No wonder why we had all the mechanics. I thought it was the perfect balance. This shall be a mercy. It's just iconic. And I feel like now that we have duty support for dungeons where you could go in with AI who are going to do all the mechanics perfectly, maybe this is going to give them a little more wiggle room to maybe find some ways to incentivize players going into the dungeon with other players, maybe some different rewards, and at the same time making them more challenging. Fun challenges, okay? Sometimes you can tell when a developer plays their own game, and it seems like he completely understands the things that we've been saying, because those are the things that he's also feeling. Like, he himself said, I'm falling asleep in the content. You know, it's not just like, oh, I'll listen. Like, he felt it out for himself. I do understand, though, and I think it's completely reasonable for many people to still, you know, maybe be cautiously optimistic and wait till we see the final product, because the truth is words are wind and the proof is in the pudding way. But I do still think that they deserve some praise for paying attention to what we've been saying and at least making a commitment to going down a different path for this new era of FF14. I do think that if anything, what Endwalker gave us that is so important to the game's long-term health and a net positive is that it forced the community to get more comfortable with and have more exposure to negative feedback, and that is feedback that YoshiP has clearly heard and agrees with and is acting upon. This game is never going to improve if you act like it doesn't have any problems. It's just like, you know, your room is not going to get clean if you act like it isn't dirty. Part of loving something is caring about it and wanting it to be the best it can be, and not flying off the handle when somebody points out something that could possibly be improved about it. So while yes, I have definitely heard some people who let their emotions get the better of them and were unfairly negative. Like even me, I've watched my own videos back at times, and holy shit, like I was emotional in these, like I know how it feels to get so wrapped up and to care so much about the game that it hurts when you feel like it's not at its very best. But even in those cases, when you're listening to someone that you don't agree with on every point, there might still be some points that they're sharing that you think have merit. And so by that, you can understand your own point of view better. So by listening to someone who you maybe don't agree with on everything, that allows you to understand better what you really think. And so it's better to let people talk and hear them out instead of silencing any kind of criticism. And I actually do think that that is something the community has gotten way more comfortable with in this past 2 years. But I also think that one thing that helps a lot is just not being wrong. I feel so smug about this. It's so insufferable. My headphones don't fit anymore because my head is just expanding. But yeah, it really does feel like nature is healing, and Dawn Trail is looking to be the best expansion we have ever had in terms of just the amount of content. Like, this actually has nothing to do with the story. We're talking about what's been announced, what we can expect, how much we will have on deck to keep us entertained throughout the life cycle of the expansion is bigger and better than anything that we've seen so far. I know I have a tendency to be quite excitable. I definitely get on the hype train pretty quickly, and once I'm on it, it's full steam ahead. I think some cautious optimism is wise, but I'm, not that wise. So yeah, just let me know what you think about everything YoshiP said. Were you surprised? Were you shocked? Are you going to pre-order or not? Let me know. And I also want to thank my patrons who are supporting the channel, and especially my Omega Buns who are supporting at the highest tier. That's Anticlockwise, Els, and Pete Wilson. You can also support the channel for free just by clicking the subscribe button or by sharing this video with your fellow Buns. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.